Hey guys, I had a chance to drive this Model 3 long range all-wheel drive. It's a 2022, so it's last year's version. And the interesting thing, and the reason why I'm making this video, is I noticed that the price of this Model 3 long range all-wheel drive is only just a couple $100, maybe less than $300 difference from my Model Y, the standard range all-wheel drive. So it was actually something that I had debated on if I wanted the Model 3 or if I wanted the Model Y. Um, so I'm gonna just talk through and maybe do a comparison on what I think the differences are. And obviously, it's a size difference. The obvious things are shorter wheelbase, it's a smaller car, less room inside, which we can go into. Um, but it does have, for the same price, you can get the same Tesla experience, but also you get about 60 miles more range with this one. This one has the 2170 cells. It's built in Austin. Again, it's last year's model. This one has maybe like 30,000 miles on it, but it's more or less kind of, again, the same Tesla experience. So let's just kind of go into it and see. This has the white interior. I'm pretty glad I did not go with white. It was a decision point on my part, but the thing with white is once you're inside, these white surfaces sort of, how do you say, they become very reflective. So it's a little bit distracting. It's not like a horrible thing, but it's something that I do notice. So I'm glad I didn't do that. Let me just get these things open for you guys. So let's look at the differences in the trunk and the frunk. So again, I'll take this out for a spin and I'll go into the differences with the driving dynamics and kind of the driving experience. But just quickly, it's a much smaller trunk. It's about the same size, but it's not as deep. You get maybe possibly about, I don't know, 6 inches of additional depth with the Y as opposed to this. So you do get a smaller trunk, but still pretty useful. This one appears to have the matrix headlights. At least that's the projector on the side there. I didn't measure the ground clearance, but I am, in terms of that parking block, I never hit that with the Y, but it does scrape a little bit on, I believe, this air dam piece right there. So those are some of the things that you may not realize when you're shopping for a sedan versus a small SUV like the Y, but the ground clearance is a little bit less on this one. So there's certainly less room back here, and really the biggest difference, aside from the obvious leg room in the back, is you're just in a much more, like, as far as the top versus the floor, you're in a much more compact kind of squished space. So when you're driving this day to day, it feels fine. It feels like a standard. It probably even feels like a Civic, to be honest, which is fine. The Civics are pretty large these days, but it is pretty compact in here. And I'm 5'11". I have no issues driving this car, but the seating position, I'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about seating position, things like that, once we get on the road here. Now, the trunk. This is really the biggest reason why I chose the Model Y, despite the additional range on this long range. I needed a hatchback. So the biggest difference really is, you get a trunk here, even though it's very large. I like to fit mountain bikes and other large objects inside my car. And for a mountain bike to fit here, it looks like you can kind of slide it through, but it will be a little bit more hassle and potentially backbreaking. So the hidden piece underneath here, The Model Y, you can lift this up and there's an additional compartment there which you can fit things that you don't use often, like say for example the 110 the 110 car charger. And this isn't as deep, but it looks, you know, maybe like 20%, 30% less in size as opposed to the Model Y. So, you know, those are kind of the obvious things as far as the exterior goes. Let's just take it for a quick ride. There are quite a bunch of things I noticed once we get on the road here. And I know it's against the law to be holding a cell phone while driving. I do not have a phone mount, but let's just see what we can do here. Actually, before we do that, let's just take a look so you guys are aware. This is a long range dual motor. It's got 35,000 miles. It does have the acceleration package or acceleration mode enabled, which is, to be honest, it's a hoot. I have it on right now and it's quite a lot of acceleration. So there's a Model Y right there, just for comparison. So let's try to get on the road quickly here. The first thing you'll notice, especially in this Fremont built Model 3, is, for example, when I'm getting out of the curb, I don't know if you hear that, but as the car articulates, you can definitely feel the chassis flex. So you feel that all throughout, like these panels rubbing on each other. So it's not annoying, it's just noticeable. The standard range all-wheel drive Model Y, the 4680 battery, is on gigacasting, so the chassis itself is much stiffer. Let me just put the acceleration mode on this thing. It's just nuts. It's a lot of fun. It is not, that particular option is not checkable or available in the standard range Model Y. I was hoping they would make it available, but it's not. And you know, for all intents and purposes, like what I will do now is I always drive this thing in chill mode anyway. It's just too much acceleration. It's a little bit too abrupt. This car has traction for days, which is nice because of the all-wheel drive. It just recently rained here and I was, you know, trying to get it loose yesterday on the street, and it just, the traction control of these new Teslas, especially most new EVs, when you can control the wheel spin at a much more granular level, these things are just, traction control is amazing. So the biggest thing you'll notice with driving the Model 3 versus the Y is just agility. It really feels like a much smaller car, in a good way. It's much lighter on its feet. It is peppier, and just in general, it's just more agile, more sporty than the Model Y. So those are kind of the obvious things, right? Not that the Model Y is a slouch by any means. It is pretty, you know, it's very much like, drives like this Macan over here. The one thing I do notice about this car immediately is just the build quality. Not so much in terms of like panel gaps and things like that. This car has, you know, pretty decent panel gaps, but it does feel like a more bolted on, put together car than the Model Y, which feels more like a solid piece. The suspension on this one is just moderately harsher than the Model Y, and I think that does have to do with the car's stiffness. The stiffer the car, the better the suspension can actually work. So I do notice that on this Model 3. And again, this Model 3 has about 20,000 miles more than my Model Y, but immediately Those are the things I noticed. Also, wind noise. Wind noise on this car, like through these window seals and maybe somewhere else, maybe that mirror, is very significant. It's actually rather kind of annoying. And most of the wind noise that I've noticed occurs, like now look at the speed, and we're starting to get faster, and I'll be quiet and you can probably start to hear the wind noise in the microphone. So wind noise is much more significant. Just general chassis noise and road noise comes through this chassis much more than the Model Y. And I think that's probably just incremental changes that Tesla has made to better the insulation and the sound dampening, NVH dampening on the Model Y. This car is significantly more efficient. Like, let's look at, I can actually put this on autopilot, trips, and like even in my last 2 miles, even of just, hooning it about, and on average, this one gets 273 in the last 5,000 miles watts per mile, which is amazing, actually. On my Model Y, I'm averaging a much higher usage, about 300. And even though I'm on chill mode, I don't baby, and I don't really like hypermile these cars. But this is noticeably more efficient as far as power consumption is concerned. So anyway, those are some of the things that I do notice. As far as seating position, this car is pretty comfortable. Like I said earlier, you are in a more compact cabin, so headroom feels more than ample on this car. It feels quite good. I have probably about 5 inches above my head. And seating position, you do feel you are sunk into the vehicle a little bit more with this car than you are on the Model Y, which feels like you're sitting on top of something. So the Model Y, for example, let me just pull over here. The Model Y, for example, the lower window position, it is like from your seating position, it's much lower. So you do feel like you're less sunk in, you're less into the car. You feel like you're kind of a little bit on top of it. It's a minor difference, but if you like to feel that you are above or at the higher level like you would in a pickup truck like that, then the Model Y is definitely more your flavor, I think. However, being that you're sunk in a little bit lower into the car, this does feel more sporty. I do feel a little bit more connected to the vehicle, so to speak. And really, that's again, I'm glad I didn't get the white interior when you're driving. This white stands out. This white stands out. The reflection on this seat, kind of everywhere, sort of stands out. Not like a huge fan of that. I want to be a little bit more comfortable inside the car, but it's cool. Like, as far as the shock value and the aesthetic kind of appeal, I definitely can understand why people would get the white interior. I'm just glad I didn't. So that's really it. Just a short video. I hope this helps you guys out. Again, this has 333 miles of range approximately, and the standard range Model Y all-wheel drive has 270, so you're at about 60% variance there. But if you're a seasoned Tesla owner and you really, again, I made a video on this on the channel, you really only need that range for long trips. If you're kind of on your day-to-day commute to work, or day-to-day, over the weekend, going out of town, but not like a huge way out of town. You might go to, downtown, the city, or whatever. The range after about 250 miles is kind of irrelevant, in my opinion. because 330 miles is a long ways to go. Even 270 for me, it really only matters if I am going on a long trip, which again, it adds, another 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes more in a trip to charge it up, as opposed to just being able to get there on one charge. So again, I don't think the range, especially now having the convenience of the Tesla charging network, I noticed that the range isn't as big a deal as I thought it would be. It would definitely be nice to have the extra range in the Model Y, because I do kind of drive it between, say, 40% to, say, 70% of state of charge. That's kind of my sweet spot. I like to keep it around there. But it would be nice for those days. All right, so if you guys have any questions, let me know. I hopefully can give you an idea of just some basic differences between two cars that are priced almost exactly the same, yet are super, super completely different in the obvious ways and also in the not so obvious ways. All right, take care. Bye now.